Hi, Lisa. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you doing, Elijah?
I'm doing fine, fine, fine. And like I mentioned earlier, thank you for being here. It means a whole lot. Thank you so much. Okay, Lisa,
Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
for having me.
yeah,
It means a lot to me for people to support
beautiful.
raising awareness about Alzheimer's disease. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am quite excited to have you on the show for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. Because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. Okay, now the second reason why I'm excited to have Lisa on the show is for the sake of the audience now. I believe there are some things that Lisa knows that some of my audience needs to hear you say these stuff, directly from your mouth in order for them to experience transformation. I firmly believe that. And lastly, that is me. You know, I am so convinced that I am definitely going to learn one or two things from your story, your insights, and your experiences. So, right now, Lisa, I want you to view me and the audience by the time they begin to listen to our conversation like you're students now. So, you are a teacher now, and we want to learn from you. Okay, so for that reason, Lisa, let's get started with your introduction and talk to us about your journey, how you got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Lisa, over to
Okay.
you.
So my name is Lisa Skinner, and I think you can see on the screen that there's a CDP and a CDT following my name. And what those mean is that I'm a certified dementia practitioner, and I'm also a certified dementia trainer and a behavioral specialist. I've been helping families navigate the heartbreaking challenges that come with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia for 30 years now. And my journey actually began 50 years ago when my grandmother, I went over to visit her one day. I was like 16 years old, and out of the blue, we sat down in her living room, and out of the blue, she started telling me about birds that lived in her mattress. They would hide there, and then when she would go to sleep at night, they would come out and they would peck at her face. And then she proceeded to tell me, she asked me if I saw the rats running around the room. And she told me that this has been happening regularly. There's just hundreds of rats that are invading her house. And the final thing she told me is, now be careful because there's these people who are constantly breaking into my home and they're stealing my jewelry, but I know they're here to harm me. So let's keep our eyes out for them. And I'm like, flabbergasted. I've known this woman all my life. We're very close. I only lived a few miles from her, saw her all the time, went over to her house for dinner all the time, spent every holiday with her. And I go over to visit, and these far-fetched, absurd stories come out of her mouth. I didn't know how to respond. I grew up in the generation where you look up to your elders, you never contradict them, you believe what they say. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I'll tell you what I did do is I said, okay, grandma, show me where these birds are getting in and out of your mattress. So we went into her bedroom. I pulled the covers off. I flipped up her mattress. I didn't see any evidence of any birds coming in and out of her mattress. And so I said to her, I said, can you show me how they're getting in and out? Because I'm not seeing any, holes. And she looks me straight in the eye. And her response, which really was masterful, she says, oh, Lisa, they're there. They're just very, very clever. I said, okay, grandma. So that was my very first experience with Alzheimer's disease. And they didn't even call it Alzheimer's disease back then. I went home and I asked my mother, did you know that there was something wrong with Grandma? And she goes, of course. And I said, why didn't you say something to me and prepare me for this just out of left field visit that I just came from? She goes, your grandma has senile dementia, whatever the heck that is. Anyway, make a long story short, because I know we're limited with time. She was the first of 8 of my family members over the next several decades that lived with one of the brain diseases that causes dementia. And there are several hundred of them, Alzheimer's being the most common. And then when I went to college, I took a course that changed my life in human behavior. I was just absolutely obsessed and fascinated with what makes people tick. Why do they behave the way they do? And then I just kind of stumbled into the elder care industry, and it was a perfect fit for me, having all these family members, and then really realizing all the behaviors that show up with dementia. It was like a perfect fit for me. So I just dedicated my life to really paying attention and understanding the complexities and the intricacies of Alzheimer's disease so I could help others and they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. Because one of the things that was obvious to me was there's very limited information for people available about this disease. Currently, there are millions of people worldwide living with Alzheimer's disease, yet it remains one of the most misunderstood diseases today. People really just pretty much exclusively relate it to memory loss and confusion. And it is so much more layered and complicated than that. And you see behaviors like I saw with my grandmother, a paranoia, thinking people were going to hurt her and stealing her jewelry and having hallucinations and having delusions and all kinds of behavioral changes in their personality. And this is what I've discovered, that most people aren't aware, that this also is part of the disease. So what you said earlier, I live by what you said. Everything starts with knowledge and understanding, especially when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. This is a long, drawn-out process for family members. My grandmother lived with it for 20 years. The average is 8 to 15 years, but that's a really long time for families to try to continue to have a really engaging relationship with somebody who's losing every single one of their cognitive abilities. It's tough. And then what I've seen in a lot of family members is they have to go through the grief process twice, because this is the one disease that the person completely gets lost. They don't recognize their family members. They don't know who they are. So you lose the person you knew first. They just aren't the same person that you knew. They don't even recognize anybody most of the time. And then they pass away. So you have to process your grief of losing your loved one twice, which is, kind of a unique situation. So anyway, that's kind of my backstory. And I'm just determined to raise awareness to the world about this disease. And Elijah, I'll tell you why. As I mentioned, there are millions and millions of people currently living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia worldwide. But we have not even seen yet the tip of the iceberg. According to the World Health Organization and the Alzheimer's Association and all the other Alzheimer's societies out there, they have all published their projections that by the year 2050, 2050, which is what? Do the math, 11 years away, the number of people who will develop Alzheimer's disease worldwide is going to triple. And the best thing that any of us can do is be prepared. And the way we can prepare ourselves is by understanding the disease, knowing what to expect, how to talk to them. You have to learn a completely different language because the way you respond to your loved one once they are living with dementia is counterintuitive and completely opposite to the way that we typically just instinctively respond to some of the things that come up. So that's why I do what I do. And I don't want everybody to have to be thrown into a situation that they are not prepared for, that's going to change their entire life for a very long time. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. I've
What,
written a couple books. Go ahead.
what, yeah, what a powerful words you've said so far. And the story you shared, you know, that's why I mentioned earlier that I am convinced that I am definitely going to learn one or two things from you. And that has happened already. This is
Oh,
actually
I'm so glad.
this is actually the very first time that I will hear the word Alzheimer that you mentioned earlier. I'm familiar with dementia, but you see, I'm struggling to understand the difference between the two. That's Alzheimer and dementia. Can you talk to us about the difference between the two?
I absolutely can. And it's a great question, Elijah, because so many people don't understand the difference. I've had a lot of people say that Alzheimer's disease and dementia are two completely different diseases. If it comes up in a conversation, somebody might say to me, "Oh, no, my mom doesn't have Alzheimer's disease. She has dementia." So let me explain the difference because there's a huge difference. All right. I mentioned earlier when I was telling you my backstory that there are over 200 brain diseases that cause dementia. So just in that statement alone, what that is saying is Alzheimer's is the brain disease. It's actually a disease that grows inside people's brains and starts to damage the different parts of the brain one by one by one. There are over 200 of those diseases that do that, but most of us aren't aware of that. And the most common one that we hear about is Alzheimer's. So when I use the term, when we refer to the term dementia, what we're really referring to are the symptoms that are displayed as a result of the brain being damaged and changed by the disease. So think of it this way. Probably all of you out there have experienced at least a cold in your life, if not a flu. And sometimes, at least it has been for me, so hard to tell what's going on. Is this a cold I have or is this the flu I have? And the way that we tell that we are sick is by the symptoms that are showing up, and they vary from person to person. So let's say all of a sudden I get a fever, I get the chills and body aches, and I get a splitting headache and, all these different symptoms. Okay, what's the clue? I know I'm sick, but I don't know exactly what I have. So I go to the doctor and I explain all my symptoms. I have a fever, everything I'm experiencing. But you, Elijah, you could get a cold or a fever and have completely different symptoms than me, but it still could be a cold or the flu. This is exactly how I like to explain dementia to people, because when we use the term dementia, it's really a blanket term that puts all of the symptoms that we see that show up in people with Alzheimer's disease, with Parkinson's disease, with Lewy body disease into the symptom bucket. And interestingly enough, no two people experience these brain diseases that cause dementia in exactly the same way. So some people might show hallucinations, they might show the paranoia, they might be, they think they live in a different time frame of their life than they really do because their short-term memory is short-circuiting. So that's the difference. Is dementia, you're talking about the symptoms, and there's hundreds of those. And no two people experience the disease, these diseases alike. Oh, and the other thing, saying that you were hoping to learn a few things, and a lot of people aren't aware of this either, that people can actually suffer from more than one brain disease simultaneously. So a person can have Alzheimer's disease that's attacking one part of the brain or several parts of the brain, and then also have Lewy body dementia disease at the same time, which just makes things even more complicated. So you really have to take each person on a case-by-case basis and evaluate each person individually.
Wow, very, very educating. I got that. But you see, I'm just so curious now. These diseases, are they incurable? Like no cure or something? Can you?
Fortunately, we have not discovered a cure
Whoa,
or even a treatment yet that
whoa,
is reliable. There's some new medications recently that have been approved by the FDA that are hoping to slow the progression down, but there is absolutely no cure today. And this is the reason why those statistics that I told you about are so just just compelling, is because there is no cure, there is no treatment, and unless we find one in the by the year 2050, the number of people that live with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia is expected to triple.
whoa.
And that's why we need to be prepared because, Alzheimer's disease was diagnosed initially by Dr. Alzheimer, and that was over 100 years ago. And we haven't made, a lot of progress in trying to treat it or even cure it. We just haven't figured it out yet. So unless we do, a lot of families are going to be hit hard, and most will not know how to deal with it. So
And you
that's why
see,
I
that makes what you're doing very important because now you're preparing people to enable them, handle the situation properly. Okay, that's gonna lead to the last question. Let's say someone
it,
asks you, "Hey Lisa, how do I respond to false belief?" I think false belief is actually very, very dangerous now. Things that aren't true, they aren't there, and now these stuffs have been installed into our minds and we take them as the truth. So how do I respond to false belief? What would your response be?
there's only one answer as far as I'm concerned to that question, and it's been studied for as long as I've been involved in this industry, and I've seen changes over the decades. And I just want to clarify one thing. They are called false beliefs, but they're not false belief to the person who has the dementia. They believe whatever they're telling you 1,000%. And what we've discovered is there's absolutely nothing that anybody can say, a clinician, a psychologist, a neurologist, nobody can talk a person or convince a person who's having a false belief out of that being their reality. The false belief is in our reality. that you know that what they're saying couldn't possibly be true, like birds living in your mattress and coming out at night and pecking at your face and hundreds of rats running around your house. There's nothing, absolutely nothing that I could have said to my grandmother to convince her that every bizarre piece of those stories that she was telling me were so far-fetched they were laughable, because she believed it. And that's what we've discovered about people living with dementia. Once they get an idea in their head, you can't steer them back into your reality. So what we do is we join their reality and we go along with whatever it is they believe at the time, because eventually, until they get to the very end of the disease, they will probably come out of it. So in order to minimize the escalation of the situation and send them into a panic, send them into aggression, don't argue with them. You just kind of go along with, just like I did when I said, okay, Grandma, come into your bedroom with me and show me where these birds are getting in and out of your mattress. I didn't know that that was the right response, but it turned out to be the right response. I validated her. And the only reason why is because I was conditioned that you don't contradict your elders. So that was just, the way I was taught. And I didn't want to say to her, oh, Grandma, you got to be crazy. What the heck are you talking about, birds living in your mattress? But it turns out, since I did become a professional dementia care practitioner and behavioral specialist, that unbeknownst to me at 16 years old, that was the correct response, to validate and to go along with it. And just, to, until she kind of snapped out of that false belief, because they do come in and out of false beliefs on a regular basis. They might believe something 1 minute, and then a minute later, they're talking about something completely different that is not a false belief anymore. So that's just kind of what you part of what you see with dementia and how it changes your brain.
I got that. I got that. And thank you for explaining
That
that
did it
way.
answer your question well?
Yeah, it did. It did. Thank you. Okay, it has been a very educating moment with you on the show, Lisa. I tell you, I've got to listen to our conversation over and over again because, nah. This is very interesting, I tell you. So, to bring this to an end, Lisa, what would you like to leave the audience with? Like a final thought. And to those ones who would like to reach out to you, learn more about what you do, maybe you said some things that resonated well with them and they would like to learn more. How can that be possible?
The one thing I want to leave everybody with today, because I've seen this happen to too many families and too many caregivers, and it just really, blends so well with what Elijah said to us at the very beginning of the program, is knowledge about these diseases and about living with dementia is going to be your superpower. So the more you can learn about it, the chances of it striking your family today are strong, based on the statistics that we're seeing and the fact that there is no cure and no treatment. So if and when it does, the more you can learn about it, to be proactive and know how to respond effectively instead of, responding that causes a bigger problem, is my advice to you. And there's a lot of misconceptions about these diseases. There's a lot of misperceptions. There's a lot of stigma. So the more you can educate yourself, the better prepared you'll be if it does strike your family. And the other thing is, who do you know who to believe? Because there's so much misinformation about this disease out there. So there are people like me out there in the world who do this professionally. If you want, I'll give you my website. It's www.mindingdementia.com. And everything I say is researched, and I don't tell people things that aren't true. I've had 30 years of experience plus my own 8 family members, and I have made it my life work to know as much about living with these diseases day by day, to help families who just don't know where to start once they get that diagnosis. So that's basically what I want to say.
Beautiful. And you see, that was golden. That was a golden advice. And I love that. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the show, Lisa. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing this amazing insight with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.